Hey everyone, my name is Carlwyn and I will be doing my presentation on muted group theory. Now, muted group theory is defined by our text consists of the idea that man-made language aids in defining, depreciating, and excluding women. The text also says that women are less articulate in public because of the fact that the language they use was in fact created by men. Um, the definition is essentially stating that within our words there's power, and that power can really only be held by the people that created it. The theory was first suggested by Edward Ardener, and he believed that it could possibly help explain why certain groups within different cultures and societies were silent or not heard at all. Now, theory basically rests on three assumptions. The first assumption is that women and men perceive the world differently because they have different perception shaping experiences. Now, perception shaping experiences are, of course, our life experiences, the way that we're raised, and the world that we see. Now, those different experiences are a result of men and women performing different tasks within society. Now, of course, those different tasks would be where you work, where you live, where you go to school, what you have to do at school, any extracurricular activities, anything like that. The second assumption is that men enact their power politically, perpetuating their power and suppressing women's ideas and meanings from gaining public acceptance. Now, of course, this assumption is pretty harsh. It's basically saying that men use the power of their words to keep the less powerful or the less heard words of women out of the public arena. Now, the final assumption is that women must convert their unique ideas, experiences, and meanings into male language in order to be heard. It's essentially saying that no matter how unique an experience is to you personally, in order to be heard, you must translate it into a way that a man can understand it. Now, with these premise and assumptions, they lead to a number of hypotheses about women's communications. The first being that women have a more difficult time expressing themselves than men do. The second being that women understand what men mean more easily than men understand what women mean. Another is that women communicate with each other using media not accepted by the dominant male communicators. Another is that women are less satisfied with communication than are men. And finally, that women are not likely to create new words, but sometimes do so to create meaning special and unique to women. Um, Obviously, since it's a man's world and it's a man-made language, although women don't create words, they can sometimes mold or shape words to make it more specific towards them. Ardener asserted that the reason why women, as well as minorities, were considered to be the muted group was because of their place within society. Proof of this theory can not only be found on television, but also in the workplace. Most jobs that are considered, to be high power or in the public arena are most often held, in fact, by men. And not only men, but more so in previous years, we're sort of moving away from it, but by the Caucasian male. When it comes to the world of communication, though, in terms of this theory, we have Chin Kramarae to thank, and I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. Um, she began analyzing the theory using cartoon characters, and she would find female characters that and would show that that oftentimes they were emotional, apologetic, and wishy-washy as opposed to their male counterparts. And if you think about this, if you think about the last time you watched a television show or even a modern cartoon, you still see the same behavior. Something that I picked up on when thinking about doing this is shows like The Simpsons, Family Guy, and American Dad, to name a few. Most of those shows are based around a family, and you have a crazy, eccentric, over the top husband that does what he wants to do. And in each of the shows, the wife is sort of there to hold everything together. And, they never really come up with too many ideas themselves. They're just kind of there to pick up the pieces when things fall apart and usually aren't thanked for it. They're very, very, very muted. Kramarae also associated the mistreatment of women to the fact that men created the language that we all use, so therefore, by nature, women are behind the eight ball when it comes to speaking. Kramarae also believed that women, to be most comfortable expressing themselves, they had to do it in a way that fit, quote unquote, their style of communication. and the forms that fit that style were writing in diaries, writing poems, letters, and so forth. But I mean, when you think about it, the women are, as this theory states, are the muted group, so they had to do that in an attempt to be able to have something that was their own. As a result of the male-driven language, Chin Kramarae and Paula Treichler, again, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, they work collaboratively to create a feminist dictionary. Now, the purpose of this dictionary was allow women to have certain words that define their particular experiences, and giving them a chance to use words that men can also use, but they're specific to them. Sexual harassment, for instance, was considered to be a huge victory in terms of feminist communication because it was able to give a name to some of the mistreatment that women were facing, especially in previous years. In the workplace, when sexual harassment was, it didn't have a name, and it was almost acceptable, or not even almost acceptable, it was standard for men to mistreat the women that they worked with because they were the muted group. Women didn't have that voice to speak out and say, hey, this is wrong. So by giving certain actions words, it made huge strides for feminists. Now, with the theory, of course, you have critiques, and one of the big critiques is that not all types of communication can be measured equally. One of the most notable is that women are oftentimes, even when using the male language, better at communicating than men. It's proven that they are able to collaborate better, better at working well in groups, and also expressing their emotions. Now, as we move forward, we know that not only women are muted. Homosexuals, African Americans, Latinos, and other minorities, they often are muted because they're not as welcomed into the style of communication that has been around for hundreds of years. Uh, a point that I found interesting with this was the fact that within those groups, even within homosexuals, you have males there. Within minorities, there are males there. So obviously, this man-made language, should fit for everyone. But that's not the case. It's not catered to fit for those who were not the originals or the founders of this country. Things like slang and ebonics come out, and that's just manipulation of the language that's already present to give those muted groups a chance to use words of their own so that their voice can be heard. Now, a theory that I saw that sort of lended a helping hand in terms of helping to explain muted group theory was symbolic interactionism. Now, this theory focuses on the process of interaction in the formation of meanings for individuals, and its three core principles are meaning, language, and thought. So with symbolic interactionism talking about why the language is made, they kind of rub together pretty well, or at least I thought so. Now, the final thing that I would like to close out with was actually a puzzle that a student in this class posted for one of their weekly assignments, and he found a book in it, and it reads, a father and his son were driving to a ball game when their car stalled on the railroad tracks. In the distance, a train whistle blew a warning. Frantically, the father tried to start the engine, but in a panic, he couldn't turn the key. And the onrushing train hit the car. An ambulance sped to the scene and picked them up, and on their way to the hospital, the father died. The son was still alive, but his condition was very serious, and he needed immediate surgery. The moment they arrived at the hospital, he was wheeled into the emergency operating room, and the surgeon came in expecting a routine case. However, on seeing the boy, the surgeon blanched and muttered, "I can't operate on this boy. He's my son." Now, many people off the bat might get know exactly where that's going, and if you don't feel ashamed, I had to think about it for a second. I was trying to figure out if it was his stepdad or, if something else, he was adopted and his real dad was there. But when it comes down to it, obviously his mother was the surgeon. And now, as we see, this is one of the greatest examples of, women being that muted group, because we hear stories like this and we automatically try to make that surgeon, try to make that person with the important job a man, because that's usually the position they hold. But obviously, that's not always the case. And by studying this theory, we can give those muted groups a voice and a chance to be heard. Thank you.